My name is Ryan, and I learned about my parents' betrayal the same way most people discover identity theft, through a phone call that made my blood run cold. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing expansion plans for my logistics company when my assistant knocked. "There's a gentleman from Hartfield Financial on line 1. Says it's urgent regarding your mortgage." I frowned. I don't have a mortgage with Hartfield. But I took the call anyway. The man on the other end was professional but firm. "Mr. Morrison, this is James from Hartfield Financial's Collections Department. I'm calling about your delinquent mortgage payments. You're now 90 days past due, and we need to discuss options before we proceed with foreclosure. I think there's been a mistake. I don't have a mortgage with your bank." There was a pause. "Sir, our records show a mortgage on 4827 Willow Creek Drive under your name and social security number. The loan was taken out 7 years ago for $380,000. My stomach dropped. 4827 Willow Creek Drive. My parents' house. The house I grew up in. "Send me everything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Every document, every signature, every piece of paper connected to this loan." The package arrived the next day. As I spread the documents across my conference table, the scope of the betrayal became clear. There was my signature, or rather, a forgery of it, on loan documents dated 7 years ago. But that wasn't the worst part. Mixed in with the forged documents were legitimate ones. A power of attorney I'd signed at 18 when I joined the military, giving my parents authority to handle my affairs while I was deployed. I'd signed it during a rushed afternoon before shipping out to basic training, my mother crying about needing to handle things just in case. I'd forgotten it existed. Apparently they hadn't. The original mortgage had been for $380,000. But over the years they'd refinanced twice, each time pulling out more equity. The current balance was $542,000 on a house worth maybe $400,000 in today's market. They'd been using my credit, my name, to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I sat in my office until well past midnight, staring at those papers. My parents, who'd raised me to value honesty above all else. Who'd lectured me about financial responsibility. Who'd made me get a job at 14 to learn the value of hard work. They'd stolen my identity and mortgaged their house in my name. The next morning, I called my lawyer, then my accountant. The damage was worse than just the fraudulent mortgage. My credit score had plummeted. There were credit cards I'd never opened, all maxed out. A car loan for a BMW I'd never driven. Total debt in my name, $638,000. "You need to file a police report," my lawyer advised. "This is identity theft, plain and simple. Your parents will likely face criminal charges." I thought about it. I really did. But instead, I asked a different question. What would it take to buy Hartfield Financial? She laughed. Then she saw my face. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Hartfield Financial was a small regional bank, publicly traded but struggling. They had maybe 40 branches across 3 states, assets of about $2.8 billion. Not huge by banking standards, but substantial. More importantly, they were vulnerable. Bad loans, poor management, stock price in the basement. "Ryan, even with your resources, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars." "I have resources," I said quietly. "And I have partners who might be interested." What my parents never knew, what I'd never told them, was that the logistics company was just one piece of my portfolio. The military had taught me discipline and strategy. The GI Bill had put me through college. But it was a chance meeting with a tech entrepreneur during a delivery that changed my life. He'd needed someone to handle fulfillment for his e-commerce platform. I'd built a solution that impressed him enough to offer me equity instead of just a contract. That equity turned into millions when his company went public. I'd reinvested wisely. Tech startups, real estate, a hedge fund. By 32, my net worth was approaching 9 figures. But I lived modestly, drove a pickup truck, and let my family think I was just doing okay with the delivery business. Over the next 3 months, I quietly assembled a consortium of investors. We made our move in October, launching a hostile takeover of Hartfield Financial. The board fought back initially, but we had the numbers. By December, I was the majority shareholder. By January, I was chairman of the board. I didn't immediately install myself as bank president. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I hired a respected industry veteran, Margaret Chin, to run day-to-day operations. But I made sure she understood certain accounts were to be handled with special attention. Meanwhile, my parents continued living their lie. They'd found temporary money somewhere, probably my mother's sister, who'd always been a soft touch, to catch up on a few payments. But I knew it wouldn't last. The bills were too high, the hole too deep. The call I'd been expecting came in March. My mother, her voice carefully cheerful. "Ryan, honey, we haven't heard from you in so long. Your father and I were wondering if you could come to dinner Sunday." I hadn't spoken to them since discovering the fraud. I'd been traveling for business every time they called. But now it was time. "I can't make dinner," I said. "But I have a business proposition for you and Dad. Can you meet me at Hartfield Financial downtown tomorrow? 2 o'clock. The bank? Why? Just be there. Ask for Margaret Chen's office." I could hear the confusion in her voice, but also relief. They probably thought I was going to co-sign something, help them out of their mess. After all, that's what good sons did, right? The next afternoon, I arrived at the bank early. Margaret had cleared the executive floor, giving us privacy. I sat in her office, my office, really, reviewing the full extent of my parents' fraud one last time. $638,000 stolen over 7 years. Credit destroyed. Trust obliterated. At exactly 2 o'clock, security called up. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison here to see Ms. Chen." "Send them up." I heard them before I saw them, my father's confident voice telling the secretary they were here for an important meeting about refinancing. My mother's nervous laughter. The ding of the elevator. Then the door opened and they walked in. My father in his best suit, the one he wore to church on Easter. My mother clutching her purse like a lifeline. They were looking around, probably wondering where Ms. Chen was, when they saw me. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. My mother's face went from confusion to recognition to horror. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Sit down," I said quietly. They sat. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Every document, every forged signature, every fraudulent loan, every credit card you opened in my name. It's all here. My mother started crying. My father's face turned red, then purple. "Ryan, son, we can explain." "No." My voice was calm, controlled. 7 years in the military, 15 in business. I'd learned to keep emotion out of my voice when it mattered most. "You don't get to explain. You get to listen." I stood, walking to the window that overlooked downtown. "Do you know what identity theft does to someone? Do you know I almost lost my first major contract because my credit was too bad to secure a performance bond? Do you know I had to explain to investors why their background check showed defaults and collections? We were desperate," my mother whispered. "The economy crashed, your father's business failed. We were going to lose the house. So you stole from your son. We were going to pay it back." My father's indignation was almost laughable. "Once things turned around." "With what?" I turned to face them. "With the BMW you bought in my name? With the credit cards you maxed out? With the equity you pulled out of the house twice?" They had no answer. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to sign these papers transferring the house deed to me. You're going to sign confessions admitting to the identity theft. And then you're going to sit here while I decide whether to have you arrested." "You wouldn't," my father said, but his voice shook. "We're your parents. Were you my parents when you stole my identity? Were you my parents when you ruined my credit? Were you my parents when you took out a loan using a power of attorney I signed to serve my country?" My mother sobbed harder. My father's shoulders slumped. "But," I said, and they both looked up with desperate hope, "I'm not going to have you arrested. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I refuse to let you make me as cruel as you've been." I pushed another set of papers across the desk. "This is a rental agreement. You'll pay market rate rent to live in the house, $2,200 a month. Every payment will be reported to credit agencies under your actual names. If you miss one payment, you're evicted. If you damage the property, you're evicted. If you so much as apply for a credit card using my name again, you're not just evicted, you're prosecuted." "Ryan," my father started. "Mr. Morrison," I corrected. "In this building, I'm Mr. Morrison. Or sir. Or chairman. I'm not your son. Your son was someone you could steal from without consequence. That person doesn't exist anymore." "How?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "How did you buy a bank?" I almost smiled. "Almost. The son you thought was a failure? The one whose identity was worth stealing because he'd never amount to anything? That son built a company worth $300 million. That son has investment partners who trust him with billions. That son bought this bank specifically so he could sit in this chair, in this moment, and show you exactly who you betrayed. The next hour was paperwork. Signatures. Deed transfers. Admissions of guilt. My parents signed everything without argument, broken by the realization of what they'd done and what they'd lost. As they prepared to leave, my mother turned at the door. "Ryan, Mr. Morrison, can we ever?" "That depends on you," I said. "You stole 7 years of my financial life. Maybe in 7 years, if you've proven you can be trustworthy, we can discuss rebuilding a relationship. Until then, you're tenants. Nothing more." They left without another word. That was 2 years ago. They've made every rent payment on time. My father got a job at a hardware store. My mother works as a receptionist. They drive used cars now, live within their means. The BMW is long gone. I hired a management company to handle the rental, so I don't have to interact with them directly. Sometimes I drive by the house, see my father mowing the lawn or my mother tending her garden. They look older, diminished. The weight of consequences has a way of aging people. Margaret Chin still runs Hartfield Financial's day-to-day operations, but I stay involved in major decisions. We've turned the bank around, focusing on ethical lending and financial literacy programs. There's something poetic about using a bank built on predatory practices to help people avoid the kind of trap my parents fell into. Last Christmas, I received a card from them. No money, no gifts, just a card with a handwritten note. "We're sorry. We love you. We hope someday you can forgive us." I didn't respond. Forgiveness isn't mine to give yet. Trust, once shattered, can't be rebuilt with greeting cards and punctual rent payments. But maybe someday. In another 5 years, when the 7 they stole from me have been repaid in time, if not in money. Until then, I own their house. I own their bank. I own the power in our relationship. And while that might sound cold, even cruel, it's far kinder than what they did to me. They stole from their child and thought poverty would make me powerless to respond. They were wrong on both counts. The truth is, buying a bank to confront your parents is excessive. Unnecessary. Probably the definition of overkill. But when someone steals your identity, ruins your credit, and betrays your trust, sometimes the only appropriate response is to flip the entire board. They wanted my name on their mortgage? Fine. Now my name is on their eviction notices if they miss a payment. They wanted to use my credit? Fine. Now I control their access to credit entirely. They wanted to pretend I was still the powerless 18-year-old who signed that power of attorney? Fine. Now they know exactly how powerful I've become. Some might say I went too far. That family deserves forgiveness, second chances, mercy. And maybe they're right. Maybe I should have just filed that police report and let the system handle it. Maybe I should have walked away entirely. But I didn't. I bought a bank. I bought their house. I bought control. And every month, when that rent payment hits my account, always on time, always exactly $2,200, I'm reminded that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. It's showing them exactly what they lost when they decided you were worth less than money.